I'll just start.
This is the most dangerous race on Earth. Motorcycles flying at over 200 miles per hour on the public road. At times, even fully airborne. And since its inception, over 280 people have died racing here. Many people are calling for it to be banned, but the fans, organizers, and of course, the racers themselves refuse to let that happen. So let's take a look at this race going back over 100 years and find out if it's truly worth it to race at the Isle of Man TT, or if it's just motorsports suicide.
280 deaths is a lot, but I've seen a few Isle of Man TT videos on the channel now. Enough to know that a lot of these people who race are truly in it for the love of the game, despite the risks. And I respect that. I got this recommendation after watching another dangerous sport on Patreon, cheese rolling. I don't think anyone's ever died from that. Hopefully. But the person who sent this in said that it's one of the better short documentaries that give a history of the sport, so here we go.
The Solby Strait, the fastest section of the 37-mile TT course. 200 miles per hour, oftentimes with only one tire touching the ground thanks to the many bumps and crests in the road's surface.
They're going so fast. They just look like colorful blurs at that point.
This isn't a race for ordinary people. Hell, this isn't even a race for ordinary racing drivers. This is a race for people who are undeniably, unequivocally insane. This year, there are a few familiar crazies. Peter Hickman, Connor Cummins, John McGuinness, and of course, Michael Dunlop.
We looked at another video that covered Connor Cummins. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I'm not going to forget his name after seeing the footage of his crash. It looked painful. I wonder if he's still racing. Connor Cummins is set to take on at the 2026 Isle of Man TT with his own team. You see, that's the definition of somebody who's in it for the game.
Are seasoned riders at the Isle of Man, but Michael Dunlop, he comes from a lineage of TT champions. Robert, his father, Joey, his uncle, and William, his brother. The Dunlop dynasty goes back nearly 50 years. But the Dunlop family represents more than just the glory of the TT, because Michael is the only surviving member of the Dunlop dynasty. His brother, father, and uncle all lost their lives racing motorcycles.
Does Dunlop have anything to do with Dunlop tires? Or no relation? That may be a relatively common surname.
And just this year, on the Isle of Man, 5 racers were killed in horrible accidents during the race. Which seems insane. Surely, this race is too dangerous to continue doing. But for nearly 120 years, the TT has yet to be stopped. And to understand why, we need to go back to when it all started. The very first race on the Isle of Man was held as a slap in the face to Britain's Motor Car Act of 1903. The Motor Car Act regulated speeds on British highways to 20 miles per hour, and it allowed local towns to implement even lower speeds as requested. By this point in time, racing was already huge in Europe, and racers in the UK saw this as a major setback. Sir Julian Ord, the secretary of the Automobile Club of Great Britain and Ireland, thought that this new act would put a strain on the advancement of performance-oriented vehicles. And so, he took action and set off to the Isle of Man in hopes of persuading the Isle's government to see things his way. Now, the Isle of Man is protected by the British military and is represented by the United Kingdom in foreign matters. But ultimately, the Isle of Man is self-governing, and the local parliament is in charge of all domestic affairs. Sir Julian Ord, a charming fellow, wined and dined a few Manx officials. By the way, Manx means from the Isle of Man. And Sir Julian Ord asked them if he could organize a race for the advancement of the British motor car, of course. The Manx authorities were happy to host this race and be part of the progress of the British automobile. So in 1904, the very next year, the Highways Act of 1904 was passed, and it allowed the Isle of Man to set up a 52-mile course for the Gordon Bennett car trials of 1904. That's right, the first races on the Isle of Man were car races, and the trials were a screaming success. Clifford Earle won the first event, doing 5 laps in 7 hours and 26 minutes. And he won it again the very next year in 1905, having done 6 laps in 6 hours and 6 minutes. But by this year, people wanted more.
6 hours and 6 minutes for a lap. Now they finished the whole course in a small fraction of that time.
More speed, more excitement, more danger. And so it was in this year that motorcycles were first introduced, competing the day after the cars race. It was called the International Motor Car Cup Race. But funny enough, bikes back then weren't quite like bikes now. Most of them didn't have enough power to get up the steeper sections of the course, and so they had to restructure the entire course to account for these low-power two-wheeled racers. This new abridged route allowed the first winner, J.S. Campbell, to finish the course in 4 hours and 9 minutes. A blisteringly fast result for the time, and his bike only caught fire once. People absolutely loved the motorcycle racing, so much so that by January of 1907 it was proposed that motorcycles should headline their own event at the Isle.
Okay, so it was arguably more dangerous in the early days. Also, I didn't know people were racing cars on Isle of Man before Le Mans.
Both the racers and organizers were on board, so they whipped up some new guidelines. They would host two classes: single-cylinder machines that averaged 90 miles per gallon and twin-cylinder machines that averaged 75 miles per gallon. On top of that, they required regulations for saddles, pedals, mudguards, exhaust silencers, but that was it. So in May of 1907, the inaugural International Autocycle Tourist Trophy took place. But if you were in the club, you called it the Isle of Man TT, and it was a smashing success. 26 people entered the event, with only 13 of them finishing, and Charlie Collier set the fastest lap in his 3.5 horsepower matchless motorcycle. And
a 1 in 2 chance of finishing. 50-50 odds. I wouldn't like my chances. You might as well just flip a coin at that point. Did they all live is the question, though.
Year by year, as more competitors signed up, those lap records were whittled away. By 1910, the fastest laps were in the low 3-hour range. And by 1911, the entire course was adjusted again. Now it was 37.5 miles, and it was called the Snaefell Mountain Course. And along with this new course came a new class, the Junior TT. This was open to 300cc single-cylinder bikes and 340cc twin-cylinder bikes. And it was a 4-lap race instead of the 5 laps of the senior class. But perhaps the biggest addition for this year were the grandstands along the course. Because by now, the crowds of spectators were so massive that just the lawns and sidewalks along the road weren't enough. The very first winner on the new course was Junior TT class Percy Evans, racing on a Humber motorcycle. He finished his 4 laps in 3 hours and 37 minutes, averaging about 41 miles per hour. In the senior class, Oliver Godfrey set the fastest time of 3 hours and 56 minutes riding an Indian motorcycle. So, as you can see, Sir Julian Ord was onto something when he started this race. And the Isle of Man was quickly becoming world famous with its ridiculous speeds and heroic racers. But along with those rapidly growing speeds came a rapidly growing death toll.
People back then probably couldn't fathom how fast the race was going to get, because Peter Evans had an average speed of 41 miles per hour. Let me see what the fastest lap of Isle of Man TT is now. Set by Peter Hickman in 2023 during the Superstock race. He averaged 136 miles per hour, or 219 kilometers per hour, and finished the lap in just 16 minutes. That is crazy.
That 1911 race was the first time that somebody died racing at the Isle of Man. Victor Surridge was killed in an accident during practice. He was attempting to overtake another racer, but ran wide and crashed into a ditch. The medics said that at the speed that he was going, he likely died on impact. This death was tragic, but like I said, it was only the first. So at the time, many saw it as a unlucky moment for the sport, a one-off tragedy. But what people didn't know at the time was that just one person dying at the TT would later be considered one of the safest weekends in its entire history. Over the years, the TT proved to be an immensely deadly race. Including that first death in 1911, 265 motorcycle racers have lost their lives on that course. Plus, one person was killed racing a car, 2 more racers died during parade laps, 5 racing officials have died in accidents, and even 2 spectators have been killed. And then there were the other fatal incidents that we'll talk about later. Today,
I've seen videos where spectators get very close, just inches away from the rider, it seems. I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that there haven't been more spectator deaths. Also, Is there a rally on the Isle of Man?
In 2022, the death toll is at 280 people. Now, to be totally fair, not all of these deaths were during the actual Isle of Man TT race. Only 155 people have died during practice or actual race, but the 280 death toll figure includes the people that died during the Manx Grand Prix and Clubman TT races of the 1940s and 50s. The Manx Grand Prix was the amateur racers version of the Isle of Man TT, and the Clubman TT was a class for production motor cars during the 40s and 50s. These classes were meant for new names to rise up the ranks, and the real stars of the sport weren't allowed to participate. Needless to say, putting total amateurs up to a grueling race like the TT ended badly for a lot of competitors. No matter how experienced you were, the TT is a race that is always knocking on death's door. The deadliest year ever, 2005, where 11 people died. The safest years? Well, since 1937, the only year where there were 0 fatalities, 1982. It's insane to think about.
82.
Anyone who attended, whether you were a racer or a spectator, knew that at least one of the people that lined up at the start line wouldn't be around at the end of the day. But that's not to say that the event organizers didn't try to make things safer. There have been numerous attempts over the years to increase safety and mitigate fatalities. But sadly, like most things today, those safety adjustments only came after tragic incidents. Frank Bateman died in 1913, and so crash helmets became mandatory from 1914 onwards. In 1927, Archie Birkin died during practice when he collided with a fish fan that was just driving on the open road. So from 1928 onwards, practice sessions were held on closed public roads. In 1934, Sid Crabtree crashed in heavy fog. Organizers didn't know where he was for over half an hour until a random bystander stumbled across his lifeless body. So from 1935, they employed 2 motorcycle riding traveling marshals that had one job: to search for missing riders. Yet, in that same year, Doug J. Perry died after crashing due to poor visibility because of mist and fog. So in 1936, they implemented a weather delay policy, in which races were postponed to the next day if the weather was inclement. And
Well, they could have done that one sooner. Some of those, like the mandatory helmets and what was the other one? The closing of the roads, I would think they would have implemented before something bad happens, but sometimes you don't know how serious something is to fix until something bad happens, unfortunately. I bet the implementation of gear made a huge difference. Modern helmets, and they also went from wearing those leather suits to high-tech fabric, just more protection.
they even moved practice sessions to the evening to avoid the slippery morning dew. And during the 50s, there were a bunch of new regulations made, even a full course restructuring. Some of the roads were widened, and buildings that were deemed too close to dangerous corners were totally demolished. But the danger was ever present. In 1970, 6 people died at the TT. So in 1971, there was further road widening. But it really seemed like no matter how many safety precautions were taken, the speed of the bikes and the racers would far outpace whatever the organizers could do. Fast forward to 2004, and a newcomer named Sergei Lemol crashed and died during his first practice session. So in 2005, they implemented a newcomer speed control lab that was introduced to familiarize newbie riders with the course. Yet in that same year, a Swedish rider
good.
named Joakim Karlsson crashed at high speed on the Kirkmichael Bend. This happened to be right outside the home of Marjorie and Ian Forrest, who not only witnessed the crash but were there when the medics came. Carlson died right there in their front lawn. And the worst part was that the medical helicopter was too busy with other crashes to come pick up Carlson's body. And so he was put into a body bag and left in the Forrest family's front lawn for 90 minutes before practice finally ended and the body could be picked up. And then there was the 2018 course car incident. A racer named Dan Neen had a horrible crash. So an official course car was sent out to go help at the scene. The course car was full, carrying police officers, and it was traveling at a high speed to get to the scene of the accident as quickly as possible. But at the same time, racers that were on the course were being directed backwards to the nearest grandstand area so they could clear the course for the officials. Steve Mercer was one of those racers. And out of the blue, the TT course car came around a bend at high speed and collided with Mercer head on. Steve Mercer thankfully survived, but he was unconscious for 5 days and he was hospitalized for 5 months. Through no fault of his own, Steve Mercer was yet another victim of the TT. Immediately after that accident, a new red flag protocol was put in place. Now, riders must stop and wait on the course until the accident is clear, and they can only travel in course direction accompanied by marshals front and rear.
Watching some of these accidents, I feel myself bracing. My body's just tensing up watching them.
So there absolutely have been efforts to make the race safer. But sadly, almost all of these safety measures are reactive instead of proactive, and they're at the cost of the lives of hundreds of TT racers.
That's sports in general, unfortunately.
As Sir Julian Ord predicted 100 years ago, when given the freedom, the automobile will continue to get faster and faster. And for the TT, that also meant that the race would continue to get more and more dangerous. But despite its dangerous nature and ever-increasing death toll, the Isle of Man TT continues to attract record-breaking crowds. Through the new millennium, the race has grown tremendously, and in 2019, the largest crowd yet was recorded with over 46,000 spectators.
Honestly, if I ever find myself on the Isle of Man, I'd like to go watch it. That and Rally, I want to experience at least once in my life. As a spectator, and not one of those spectators that get too close. Or stand there on the corner. Right here in the stands looks perfect to me.
Then the race took a break for 2 years because of the pandemic. But regardless, it's proof that despite all the negative press, spectators and racers alike love the Isle of Man TT. But of course they do. What is there not to love? Every year we get to see the fastest and craziest motorcycle racers on the planet compete in a sport that is so raw, so visceral in feeling. With car racing, it's easy to see the field as just machines. But with motorcycles, each bike is seen as an extension of the rider, a living, breathing limb that racers use to perform some of the most exciting feats on the planet. Just watch the insane POV clips, the do or die Hail Mary saves, and of course,
I have to watch that one again. The wobbles on his leg? He was hanging on by a thread there for a second.
And of course, the record-breaking lap times. The fastest outright lap ever was set by Peter Hickman riding a BMW S1000RR, 16 minutes and 42 seconds. And he did it by averaging over 135 miles per hour for the entire lap. Then there's our old friend, Michael Dunlop, who still holds the records in supersport and lightweight TT classes. And then there's Jenny Tinmouth, the fastest female ever to lap the Isle of Man.
Are there many female drivers? I remember when we watched the sidecar video, there were some in the sidecar. Or carriage? Or maybe the carriage is called the sidecar. Also, completely unrelated, I keep staring at the way this guy is wearing his ring. I just want to twist it around.
Did an 1852 in her CBR 1000. And then there's arguably the most fun class to watch, sidecars. Sidecars were added to the list of classes in 1923, and it's been going strong since. These things are sick. Just look at this. Absolutely bonkers stuff. The fastest sidecar lap ever was done by brothers Tom and Ben Burkhall in their Honda CBR. They averaged 119 miles per hour and lapped an 1859. An average of 119 miles per hour while leaning like this. Absolute mad lads. And this event isn't just a big deal for motorcycle racers and enthusiasts. It's also a massive revenue stream for the Isle of Man as well, bringing in millions of pounds every year. In 2019 alone, the event generated an estimated 37 million pounds for the Manx economy. And that's the thing. The TT is an integral part of the Manx economy. When the pandemic struck, it was estimated that the race closure cost the Isle of Man somewhere around 246 million pounds. So despite the numerous calls to ban the event by bereaved families, politicians, and onlookers, it only makes sense that the Manx government would continue to greenlight the TT, as it's such a big part of their economy. In fact, the only times that there hasn't been a TT was World War I, World War II, the COVID pandemic, and 2001, when everyone in England got foot and mouth disease. But let me take a step back. Does any of this matter?
What happened there? Foot and mouth. But also its completely unrelated cousin hand foot mouth sound rough. Hand foot mouth is more common in babies though. And I thought foot and mouth was purely a livestock thing. Had no idea it could affect humans. At all. Good to know.
The opinions of people like us, outsiders looking in. We may not think the risk is worth it, but to the spectators, the organizers, the racers themselves, hell, the motorcycling world at large, it is worth it. Those who take on the TT are not coerced. They do it willingly, be it for fame or fortune or just for the thrill of it. And if somebody like Michael Dunlop, who's lost his entire kin to motorcycle racing, can come back to take his 21st title all while proclaiming that the TT should never stop, who are we to tell him otherwise? Over 300 people have died climbing Everest over the years. Over 500 people have died in professional boxing alone. And since 1981, there have been over 400 deaths base jumping around the world. And while all of those communities have worked to make their sport safer over the years, just like the TT, they are still dangerous, just like the TT. So, armed with that knowledge, let me ask you again. Is it worth it? Like much of life, it's a bit of a moral quandary.
It's not worth it to me, but I'm not passionate about motorcycles like these people are. And the ones who participate surely know the risks. They know that they could die, but they choose to get on the bike anyway. Just like people who strap on a parachute and jump out of a plane. Or anyone on Red Bull's YouTube channel trying one of those extreme stunts. I appreciate that there are people out there like that. I also do suspect that if you took the race away, those who were really passionate about it would still find a way to do it. The TT makes rally look tame to me though.
One that perhaps will never have a clear answer. But for me, somebody who's too afraid to ride a motorcycle on the highway, I can't help but feel tremendous admiration for the feats of heroism, the unfolding legacies, and the absolute motorsports madness that only the Isle of Man TT can create. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please do hit the like button. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.
I'm going to link you this guy's video. He's called Albon in the description. This is the first video I've seen from him, but he does have other motorsport videos. I saw a few Formula 1 options on his page I may need to watch. Ending this on a more positive note, most racers don't die. It is undeniably dangerous though. Some people just like going fast. And at least these people are on a closed course. If you like motorsports, or just extreme sports in general, leave your thoughts. I was curious, so I looked up if there were any studies or info on what the most dangerous sport in the world is. As you can imagine, it was hard to find a concrete answer, but I looked at 3 different resources. I'll link them all in the description. 2 of the 3 had base jumping as their #1 most dangerous sport. The 3rd had free solo climbing as their most dangerous sport. And if you've ever seen the documentary on Netflix, that is unsurprising. 2 of the 3 had motorcycle racing in general as their 3rd most dangerous sport. And the last one put it at number 7. Other notably dangerous sports out there. Bull riding. Cave diving's also up there. So is mountaineering. Surprisingly, or not, so is cheerleading. I think bull riding is something I'd find interesting to watch. Anyway, I don't have any book or music recommendation for you today, so thank you for watching with me, and I'll see you next time.